Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to a radio series in which a divine discourse delivered by Bhagavan is played in small parts, and following each part, a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. This is a part of Radio Sai's Thursday Live, hosted by Sai Prakash and Prem, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. only on Asia stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 22nd August 2013. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality 1990. The clips played in this episode are from the discourse delivered on 24th May 1990.
Sai Ram and welcome one and all to yet another episode of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. And as always, I'm being joined by Brother Sai Prakash from Team Radio Sai. Sai Ram, Sai Prakash.
Sai Ram, Prem. I think we are venturing to start the next discourse, that is the sixth discourse in the series.
Right.
Given by Bhagwan in 1990 summer course. And Swami has been expounding the significance of the body, the senses, and I think it's the turn of the mind right now.
Right. The past two discourses, I think Swami spoke extensively on the control of the senses. And now it's the mind. And very beautifully, the discourse is named Hold the Reins.
Hold the Reins, that's true.
And before we talk about this discourse or we give you a summary of what we've been doing, we would like to first of all beg pardon to all our listeners because the clips we are going to play for this discourse are not of very fine audio quality because it was not recorded in very good audio quality. Whatever we could, we have tried to enhance the quality and present it to you. But we would suggest that if you're listening to this program through a computer with an internet connection, you could go to the site sssbpt.info. That is SSS, B for Baba, P for Puttaparthi, and T for Thursday. That's sssbpt.info. If you'd go there, you will find in the left there are links for Swami's Vahinis, summer showers, and the other discourses. You can select summer showers. You'll be taken to a page where you will be shown all the summer course discourses which are there. You can pick the 1990 summer course series. It'll show all the chapters. And we are in the sixth discourse. And the discourse name is, as we mentioned, Hold the Reins. So I think that way you'll be able to follow the discourse even as we play it here, clip by clip. Coming to what Swami has been telling us all this while, so beautifully Swami is relating not only the need for controlling the different senses, but also giving us the manual as to how each of these can be done, the senses and the other aspects of the human body.
That's true, but there's something significant that we are coming to when we start this chapter, as I'm just thinking about it. Till now, we were dealing with things, rather the body, the senses, which we can see, which we can perceive. Now we are going into a stage, we are going to the mind, we are going to start dealing with the mind. What is the scientific proof, if any? Can we see the mind? Does the mind exist as a physical entity? There is a brain that we all know, but does the mind really exist?
Right, the presence of the brain does not guarantee the presence of the mind, actually.
That's true. And
so what is that and where does that exist?
When you actually go through the discourse and you see how much importance is given to the mind and how Swami says everything is because of the mind, you start wondering what is more powerful, the gross or the subtle? Obviously it is the subtle, because these are senses, the body, this is what you see, you can feel them, you perceive them, you hear through them, but then there is the subtler mind, which we do not know whether it exists. You just have to go based on your faith, and you have to go based on a deeper sense of understanding that basically you are going beyond the physical in another way, putting it in another way. You are trying to understand that there are entities, there is something which is beyond the physical. You cannot limit everything that there is to just physical. Because you perceive with your eyes, which is one of the senses, and you're limiting it to the capability of the eye. So if there is something that the eye cannot see, does that mean that such a thing does not exist? Take the mind, for example. Because there is no physical entity for the mind, does it mean that the mind doesn't exist?
Very true. I think, if you look at man's scientific journey, that is one of the things which man has understood through his endeavors in science. Because every aspect which he has studied of the physical manifest universe has taught him that there is something beyond what he can see. There is something there is beyond what he can hear and what he can feel with his ability. Because even if you take the concept of light, it was only what was seen.
True.
But the more they studied into light, they realized that there are so many spectrums which cannot be seen with the naked eye. And the very fact that you cannot see them does not, say that they do not exist.
That's true.
So I think the very fact that you become more knowledgeable, you begin to accept things which may not be under your, area of understanding also. Because, one of the discourses which we went through, Swami says that, the most obvious thing is diversity. The most obvious cognizable entity in nature is diversity, because there's no individual who is similar to another individual.
Very true.
But human intellect and human ability lies in seeing the unity behind all that diversity.
That's true.
So as you said, the mind is one of the most important things, because it itself is an embodiment of that, paradox.
True.
Existence without being noticed.
Correct. Swami says the thoughts make up the mind. And this is like a threshold actually, because food, if you see, has a physical existence. And Swami says the thoughts are governed by the food. So if you eat sattvic ahar or good food, then you get good thoughts. So here is where we are crossing the line from an actually physical thing like food to something subtle, that is thoughts, which does not have a physical appearance.
Very true. And even looking at it from the point of view of devotion, we all would like to be obedient to Swami, right? When Swami tells us something, we want to do it. And in a certain level, we believe that we are all obedient. We all feel that Swami has not told me anything, and if he tells me, I'll definitely do it. Because we believe that, our love for Swami, our devotion, or the kind of respect we have for Swami will give us that obedience. If Swami were to be here and Swami says, no, you don't sit down, you stand and talk. So we would stand and talk. Or if Swami says, no, you stop talking, we would stop talking. These are all possible because we have control over this sitting and standing and talking and not talking. We have control over this physical body of us.
Correct.
And anything which Swami would give pertaining to our physical presence, that would be easy to follow. If Swami says eat only dinner, don't eat breakfast and lunch, it would be difficult, but we can do it.
We can do it, that's true.
But if Swami were to come and tell us that you should not think more than 4 thoughts a day.
God.
However much we might love to be obedient to Swami, it would be absolutely impossible, because we have not earned that control over the mind as much as we've earned the control over the body.
That's true.
So we have done so much in obedience to what Swami wanted. We wore clothes like what Swami wanted. We groomed ourselves the way Swami wanted. But it is still incomplete obedience, because we cannot control the mind and, maneuver it the way Swami would want us to do. So even devotionally, our obedience to Swami is not 100% unless we control.
Exactly. As you're talking about devotion, it's something so beautiful, and somewhere I think it's in the Viveka Chudamani I read, there Adi Shankara goes into different ways that are used to control the mind. He says something like Sama, for example, is continuously telling the mind that this is not what it is not what it is, and get detached again and again. Then Dhamma, that is self-control, you control. Then he says Titiksha, or forbearance. Uvrati, Titiksha, all these things are ways. Samadhana, then you go to Shraddha, then these ways he propounds. But you just go a few shlokas later, he says there's nothing higher than devotion. He says the moment you have 100% devotion and you are ready to I think there he mentions you have devotion to the Guru, for example. So there he mentions it in that context. But for us where Swami himself is our Guru, if we just try to follow him with devotion, these don't become an end. They become they automatically happen.
Right.
We should not say that, I have to achieve Sama, I have to achieve Dhamma, I have to achieve self-control. But they automatically get part of you when you have the devotion to Swami.
Very true. If you look at it, suppose you have a boy who is studying in a school.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to play.
Mm-hmm.
Evening time he loves to go out and play. But the sense that comes in when there is an exam which is impending,
mm-hmm.
he knows that I like this, I know I get a lot of joy out of this, but I know now I should not play, I should study.
Mm.
Okay, because there is a sense of purpose.
Correct.
There is something which is higher which he is after.
Mm.
I think that's what devotion does to us. When you have pleasing that deity or that personality whom you call a guru, or in our situation being Swami, that idea of pleasing Swami is uppermost in the agenda. That you are ready to put yourself through anything if I can please Swami.
And just few discourses back, Swami said, what is devotion? Devotion is when you turn towards the Atman. Devotion is towards Atman, to strive to reach oneness with Atman. That is devotion. See, whether you call it Swami, Guru or whatever, but it's ultimately trying to turn inwards. And he says that power is in you. So he says that is true devotion.
And talking about this Sama, Dhamma and Purati, they're called the Sat Shampatis.
Okay.
The sixfold wealth a person is supposed to acquire. And interestingly, though these look like very simple 6 things, the Brahma Sutras start with that aphorism which says, Athato Brahma Jignasa.
Yes, correct.
Henceforth you will seek the Brahman.
Correct.
And in explanation to that one statement, the Brahma Sutras say that these are all qualifications if which you have, you will come to that state of henceforth you will seek the Brahman.
Oh, that's the first line.
And that is what Swami has been doing. And we are, you can say midway. Where Swami spoke about, Dhamma is body and sense control. Sama is mind control. So Sama, Dhamma, and Swami is going through all that. And Swami will talk about Viveka, which is also one of the aspects of discrimination, the Buddhi playing a role. And all these are so important, in this. It adds one by one, brick by brick, to that ultimate image, which Swami spoke of in the first discourse.
Just imagine hundreds and thousands and millions of people who have absolutely no knowledge of things like this. I mean, yes, people may know there is a brain and some may know there is a mind. There may be many who may not even know that there is something called a mind, that there is something called a buddhi, there is something called an atma. Sometimes you just wonder, people have come, they have lived their lives and they go back without knowing any of this. And yes, we are fortunate that we know this. But by following this, what is it that we are going to achieve? I mean, unless the joy of actually knowing the Atman and being one with your true self is much, 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 much higher than any of the joy that you have ever experienced. I mean, so many sages and so many seers would have never gone on that path, because it's so simple to just go on an outwardly path. So he says pravritti and nivritti. So it's actually so simple to go on the path, just lead your life swayed by the senses. Unless what we are really trying to achieve gives you so much more happiness and so much more joy, it's not really worth pursuing, I would say.
We talk of human nature. One of the flaws of human nature being the ability to not be satisfied.
True.
That's what drives materialism and materialism, whatever you call it in the world. That is what drives, because man is not satisfied. But if you look at it, that very attitude of not being satisfied is also the fuel for spiritual pursuit also.
Very true. Because
man is not being able to, find satisfaction in being in comfort, living in a peaceful environment. Because there is something that, there's something more to it, something more happiness which gives something special more than what I'm having now. Even the most happy and most comfortable of persons get to think this way.
Correct.
And I think that is what Swami is encashed on in all of us. That very flaws with which we came to Swami, those themselves have become paths for us. Those themselves have Swami has utilized to draw us closer to him. So maybe we should go to the first discourse, first part of this discourse. This is the 6th discourse in the series, 1990 Summer Course. This was delivered on the 24th of May. So let us begin to listen the first clip of that discourse.
మనసే హేతు మనుగడకును బంధమునకు మాన్యతకును మనసే హేతు మనుజుని మనుగడకును బంధమునకు మాన్యతకును మనసే ముక్తికి ముఖ్యము మనసే ముక్తికి ముఖ్యము మనసే నరకంబు తెచ్చు మైమరపించు మనసే ముక్తికి ముఖ్యము మనసే నరకంబు తెచ్చి మైమరపించు మనసే మనసే నరకంబునిచ్చు మైమరపించు.
For the growth of man, for his bondage, and for conferring respect on him, it is the mind which is the cause and which is responsible. For liberation also, mind is the cause. Mind is capable of putting you into hell and make you forget yourself, getting intoxicated.
విద్యార్థులారా,
Your students,
మనసు కలయికని మానవుడు.
man is a combination of body, mind and Atma.
మానవుని యొక్క భావములను నిర్ణయించి అంతని ఉన్నత స్థితి కొనిపోయేటువంటి సోపానములు.
These are the steps and stepping stones for the man to make his feelings grow into the highest level.
కర్మలు ఆచరించినది దేహము.
The body performs action.
తెలుసుకున్నది మనస్సు.
Mind knows about it.
నిత్యమై సత్యమై నిరంతరము ఉన్నది ఆత్మ.
Atma is one which is permanent and eternal and continuously acts as a witness.
ఇదియే మానవుని యందలి దేవత.
That is the very God in man.
చేయుట, తెలుసుకొనుట, ఉండుట, ఈ త్రిశక్తుల యొక్క అభివ్యక్తమే మానవత్వం.
Doing, becoming aware and being. These are the three important aspects of man.
అయితే మనసు, దేహము, ఆత్మ వేరు వేరు రూపముల చేత వేరు వేరు ఫలితములను అందించుతూ వేరు వేరు నామములు కలిగి ఉండినప్పటికీ ఈ మూడింటి యొక్క ఏకత్వము చేతనే మానవత్వము దివ్యత్వమును నందుకోవచ్చుంది.
Body, mind and Atma have different names, different forms and different nature. But all of them put together are responsible for making man divine.
ఈ మూడింటి యొక్క భిన్నత్వమే మానవుని పశుత్వమునకు పోతుంది.
When you bring about difference between these three and make them go in different directions, he becomes an animal.
లౌకికంగా, పారలౌకికంగా మనము తరచుగా వినేటువంటిది అంతఃకరణ అనే పదం.
It is the word antakarana which we commonly hear both in common parlance and in spiritual language.
ఏమిటి ఈ అంతఃకరణ?
What do you mean by this
దీని
antakarana?
స్వరూపం ఏమిటి?
What is its form?
దీని స్వభావం ఏమిటి?
What is its nature?
దీని విశిష్టత ఏమిటి?
What is its speciality?
వీటి గమ్యం ఏమిటి
What is its goal?
అని విచారణ చేసినప్పుడు మనసే అనేక విధములైనటువంటి యొక్క సూక్ష్మరూపములు ధరించి అంతఃకరణ అనేటువంటి పేరును అందుకుంటూ ఉన్నది.
When you inquire all these things, you will conclude that in its subtle forms, mind takes the form of antahkarana.
ఇది మనస్సు, బుద్ధి, చిత్తము, అహంకారం ఈ 4 ఆకారములు కూడాను మనసే ధరిస్తూ ఉంటున్నాడు.
There are 4 forms which this mind takes. The mind per se, intelligence, chittam and ego.
బుద్ధి, చిత్తము, అహంకారము మనస్సు యొక్క సూక్ష్మ స్వరూపముది.
Intelligence, chittam and the ego are these subtle forms of mind.
ఒక్కొక్క కర్మ యందు ప్రవేశించినప్పుడు ఒక్కొక్క పేరును పొందుతూ ఉంటుండాలి.
Mind while doing different functions will get a different name.
ఒకే బ్రాహ్మణుడు మందిరం నందు భగవంతుని పూజ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు అతన్ని పూజారి బ్రాహ్మణుడు అంటారు.
When a Brahmin is performing worship in the temple, he is called a priest.
ఇతనే వంట రూములో వంట చేస్తున్నప్పుడు ఇది వంట బ్రాహ్మణుడు అంటారు.
When the same Brahmin is cooking food in the kitchen, he is called a cooking Brahmin, a cook, Brahmin cook.
ఈ బ్రాహ్మణుడే విద్యార్థులకు విద్య బోధించుతున్నప్పుడు ఆధ్యాత్మిక బ్రాహ్మణుడు ఉంటారు.
When the same Brahmin is teaching to the students, he is called the Brahmin teacher.
పంచాంగములు చెప్పుతున్నప్పుడు ఇతను పంచాంగ బ్రాహ్మణుడు అంటారు.
When he is telling something about the astrology, he is called an astrologer.
బ్రాహ్మణుడు ఒక్కడే అయినప్పటికీ ఆ బ్రాహ్మణుడు చేసే వృత్తులను పురస్కరించుకొని అతనికి ఇట్టి నామములు కలుగుతూ వచ్చాయి.
On the basis of functions performed by the Brahmin, although Brahmin is one, gets different names.
అదే విధముగానే సంకల్ప వికల్పములతో కూడినప్పుడు దీన్ని మనస్సు అని ఒక పేరుతో పిలుస్తూ వచ్చేది.
In the same way, when there is the thought processes, it is called mind.
వివేచన అనేటువంటి ఒక సమయమునందు అనగా విచక్షణ జ్ఞానము చేత విషయమును విచారించి నిర్ణయపరిచేటువంటి సమయం నందు దీనికి బుద్ధి అని పేరుతో పిలిచారు.
When it inquires into the nature of objects and takes a decision, it is called buddhi.
ఇది కేవలము విచక్షణ జ్ఞానంతో కూడినటువంటి విచారణ.
It is an inquiry based upon discrimination.
దీనిని డిస్క్రిమినేషన్ నాలెడ్జ్ అంటారు.
This also is called discrimination knowledge.
మూడవది చిత్తము. ఇది స్మృత్యాత్మకమైనటువంటిది కనుకనే దీనికి చిత్తము అని పేరు వచ్చింది.
The third one is chittam.
స్మృత్యాత్మకమైనటువంటిది.
It is the one which remembers and therefore it is called chittam, memory.
దేహముతో తాదాత్మ్యం పొందిన సమయం నందు కలిగేటువంటి యొక్క స్వరూపమునికే అహంకారము అని పిలుస్తూ వచ్చారు.
When the mind identifies itself with the body, it is called ego.
ఒకే మనసు ఇన్ని కర్మల యందు ఇన్ని స్థానముల యందు ఇన్ని రకమైనటువంటి పేరును పొందుతూ ప్రకటిస్తూ వచ్చింది.
Mind gets these different names depending upon the function which it performs.
అన్నింటికి మనసే కారణం.
For everything, mind is the cause.
ఈ ప్రపంచమంతా కూడాను మనస్సు చేత కట్టబడి ఉంటుండాలి.
This entire world is created by mind.
మనోమూలం ఇదం జగత్తు.
The world exists by mind.
మనసు లేనటువంటిది ఎక్కడ కూడాను కానరాదు.
It is difficult to come across a space where you do not have mind functioning.
ఇట్టి మనసును కలిగినటువంటి వాడు కనుకనే ఇతనికి మనుష్యుడు అని పేరు వచ్చింది.
Man gets the name Manushudu because he has a manas mind.
So that was the first clip, and dear listeners, you would agree with us that audio quality was a bit bad, but we hope you would have followed what Swami said, because these were the theoretical aspects of the mind. I think this is almost like the course 101 of
it's
of the
like
human mind.
it's like the definitions.
Right.
The definitions are being given.
And again, that pattern with which Swami delivers that discourse, that poem in the beginning is so beautiful. It gives the idea of, we're going to take this chapter. Why is this chapter important?
Executive summary.
Right, why are we having this chapter? Why are we going to talk about the mind? Because the mind is such and such. This is the nature of the mind and this is the power of the mind. That's why it's important to understand it. And Swami says mind is a cause for rise and fall. Mind is a cause for bondage and liberation. And mind alone, makes man forget his reality and land himself in
hell. So powerful. But, the first paragraph especially, each sentence is so measured. This suddenly struck me today as we was hearing to Swami, although the quality was poor, as you mentioned. But each sentence is so measured and each sentence is so deep. I mean, each sentence has so much you can discuss upon. See, he says the body is the instrument for actions. The mind is concerned with cognition. It's the mind that knows. That's what is translated. But the body is meant for action.
So beautifully, Swami says the mind, body and the Atma, the three aspects of any living entity. And then Swami says, thus, doing, knowing and being.
Correct.
Are the manifestations of human personality. Where,
doing is the body. Knowing is the mind.
And being
is the Atman.
Is the Atman or the consciousness.
I don't think it can be made simpler than this.
Really.
And there's nothing more to add in this. It's so simple.
And maybe as Swami said, we could just reiterate this thing of Swami explaining the four aspects of the mind. Swami says that the four aspects are the manas, buddhi, chitta and ahankara.
Correct.
Where manas is the thinking mind, all the thought processes which go on, the wavering nature of the mind. That is actually an attribute of what we call manas.
Correct.
And buddhi is the intellect. Swami says the discrimination knowledge. That which decides what is right, what is wrong, what has to be done, what should not be done. That is the role. When the mind takes that role, it is buddhi or the intellect. And chitta is the memory. That
Correct.
which preserves all the impressions. And what Swami says in other discourses is that this chitta actually carries forward these impressions from birth to birth.
Okay. Yes.
It is almost like that hard drive which essentially makes that personality. And this is something which is coming to be known even scientifically now.
Okay.
When they do psychology and they study why certain people behave in a certain way. Why certain people in a similar situation, why one gets angry, one gets scared.
Correct.
One reacts differently. That is because of the way they are wired. That's the word they use now. The way you're wired. Because nervously, neurologically how you're made. That is because of your life experiences.
Tell them it's the mind.
I just think of that, think of chitta. And before we go to that, ahankara is of course the ego.
Correct.
Which thinks that you are separate from the others. Thinking of this memory, I remember I have a friend who is extremely scared of lizards.
Okay.
The moment he sees a lizard, he'll run away. And I used to think, what's with the lizard? Because even when we were children, we've always lived with, in India, you just live with
Correct.
some of these creatures. So we've always had lizards in our home. And I used to always wonder why he's so scared of lizards. But then later he told me that when he was a kid once, he had a very bad experience with the lizard. I think a lizard fell on him when he was a small kid and he developed an infection.
Okay.
His face got swollen to about 2 times its size.
Oh, okay.
And he took close to 2 or 3 weeks to recover from it.
Okay.
So, if you look at it, that was the impression which had gone in his mind. And the way he reacts when he sees a lizard will always be based on that experience of his. And because my childhood, I've never had an experience such as that.
Correct.
I would never be able to understand his reaction
That's
towards
true.
it unless he explains it. And that again goes with, some people how they are scared with dogs. And most of them would have either had a bad experience of being bitten by a stray dog or would have seen somebody being bitten by a stray dog.
That's true. And of course, memory in that sense is so important in every aspect. Like Many of us remember our teachers when we were in the school, or remember our friends, we remember our roommates, and so many instances associated with that. In a way that shapes our approach.
And that is the beautiful thing of this chitta, because what you said in the beginning about believing in the existence of something which cannot be seen, actually that role comes in this chitta aspect of the mind.
Correct.
Because the mind, it sees, like if you see the first few scientists, how did they discover that the earth is round? One of the classic examples, even when we study in science, we come across, is when they see a ship approaching from the deep seas. Correct. They see that the ship is not seen from small to big. They see the top part of the ship, then they see the rest of the ship. So they're saying that it must be coming from some surface which is lower. Correct. It's almost like the ship is raising. So then they said that's possible only if the surface is round.
Correct.
Okay. If you look at it, the ability to collect information, even as you see it, and put it in context with something which you've already seen. And you say, okay, I've seen this happen this way. Now I'm seeing this happen. So let me put this together. And I understand something which I'm not actually seeing.
That's true. I mean, just take the same example that you gave of the boy seeing the lizard. I mean, it is the eye that sees the lizard as a lizard, but it is the chitta that associates the memory of what happened with it, and the whole body reacts. It's like, throwing a pebble in a lake. The lake is placid and without any disturbance. The moment a pebble falls, there are so many ripples. So also, I think these thoughts that come in the mind, they cause ripples all over the body. The whole body responds to it.
Right, one Advaitic Guru, he explains that point. He said, how will it be if you're absolutely dissociated from the mind? He said, you will be a perfect neutral observer.
Okay.
So he was explaining, the concept of the chitta coming into play. He said, I am sitting in a common place, in a public space, like an airport or something. Okay. And my flight is delayed by an hour. I'm sitting there and I'm seeing, I have nothing to do, so I'm just looking around. So he says, I'm just seeing people as they come. Some people are taking their luggage, some people are running for their flight, some people are standing in the checkout line. I have no impressions. I'm just seeing things as it happens.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm not emotionally aroused. I'm not thinking of anything. I'm just seeing the scene.
Correct.
But the moment I see somebody whom I recognize, the moment I see somebody who at least resembles somebody whom I know, immediately, the mind jumps into action and starts thinking, what is this person doing here?
Correct.
Or brings in memories of that person, your association with that person. So he says, as long as this chitta is completely negated, you can be in that perfect sakshi bhutam, what you call that state of being a witness. So I think that is why this chitta is such an important thing.
True.
And that's why over and over again in all spiritual literature, and Swami himself emphasizes that the true essence of sadhana is to bring that chitta shuddhi. But
just out of interest, is there a way of controlling what goes into the memory? Is there a way of what goes into chitta, for example? Like whatever you see, whatever you perceive, possibly that's why he says control your senses, so that you do not perceive, you do not see, you do not hear, you do not do something which will give you a bad memory. Which will go and sit like a blotch on the chitta.
You see less and you store less.
I think that's what it is. See, chitta shuddhi, that's what, when they say purity of chitta, for example, it is when you remember only pure things, when you remember only pure sight, when you remember only pure hearing. So for that you have to do things which are pure.
I mean, if you look at it that way, I think when you say chitta shuddhi, when you say purity, you're talking of the native state, or the state before it gets adulterated.
That's true. That's very true.
So I think the basic nature of chitta should be the belief that there is only oneness.
True.
And I think every other feeding of the senses only kind of buries this main thought which is there in the chitta. And maybe layer by layer removing it is what all sadhana
is about. That's true. But, somewhere else Swami has mentioned, in the beginning here in this discourse, Swami mentions that mind is responsible for birth and for bondage and for liberation. Elsewhere, Swami has mentioned that there are 3 qualities that are the main reasons for rebirth. There are 3 qualities that cause rebirth. One is sin, another is ignorance, and third is unfulfilled desires.
Okay.
Okay, so one is sin, one is ignorance, another is unfulfilled desires. Now when you take sin, so sin is what? It depends on your thoughts. So when you get a good thought, your body follows the good thought. When you don't get a good thought, you do something which becomes a sin. So again, that is an aspect of the mind, thought and mind, that's related to the mind. Then you go to ignorance. Ignorance is tamas. It's a tamasic nature. And that is when the mind turns outwards.
Right.
So when the mind turns outwards, that becomes tamasic. And so that is a cause for ignorance. And then when you say unfulfilled desires, mind itself is a bundle of thoughts and desires. So in this way, if you analyze, you realize that mind is actually the reason for bondage or liberation. So if these three reasons are the cause for your rebirth, mind is actually the main culprit behind them.
The no limit to the number of ways Swami is told how to control the mind, because that was one thing which was a question which was always asked of Swami.
Correct.
Especially, I think, students, youngsters. One of the questions we always asked for Swami, how to control the mind. Whenever Swami would say, if you have any questions, you ask me. I think almost at least one person would say, Swami, how do we control the mind? And Swami has given various answers, I think, depending on the person who has asked. And I think one of the things Swami has told is, the perfect, beautiful analogy of the mind being the handkerchief.
Okay. Yes.
And thoughts being the threads.
Threads. That's
true. Remove each thread. And the moment when all the threads are removed, the cloth does not exist at all.
Beautiful. I think there is one more example which Swami gives, where I think we have mentioned it in this course of this series earlier. But nevertheless, Bhakti Marga and Jnana Marga, he says God is in the first floor of the house.
Right.
Is walking on the balcony. And you want to reach God. And there is this bulldog. That is the mind. So you go to the gate and there is this dog there. You have to somehow overcome this dog and reach God, who is the Atman. So he says, you stand at the gate and shout out, "Oh God, please come and save me. Please take me. I am not able to cross this because this dog is there on my way." That is Bhakti Marga. You stand and you just shout, you cry out to the Lord, and He is bound to come. The moment He comes, the dog keeps silent and then He takes you along with Him. But Jnana Marga, on the other hand, you understand that this dog is there, you feed him biscuits and you make him happy, and then you easily overcome and you go up.
Very beautiful. That is the thing when people ask, when devotees do many things in the name of devotion, none of these things might actually get you that ultimate state, or whatever you think is the ultimate state. None of these things, people do all kinds of things in the name of rituals. Will it really get you there? The answer may be no, but one of the beautiful stories which they say about devotion is, there's a man who's a juggler by profession.
Okay.
His profession is go to the king and juggle in front of him and entertain the king and get his livelihood by that means. So one day he goes to the temple and stands in front of the deity and starts juggling. Okay, and the story goes, to dramatize it, the Lord who is there in the temple is wondering, what is this guy doing? Why is he coming in front of me and juggling? So he goes on juggling, and the Lord comes out of curiosity and says, what are you juggling in front of me for? So that man says, when I go in front of the king and juggle, he gives me money, the wealth he can. So I've come to juggle in front of you to get that wealth which you give. Okay. And then the Lord says that, but don't you know that I am the Lord and you cannot please me by all this stunt. You cannot please me by stunt. So he says, yes, Lord, I know. But this stunt devotion is all that I know. So I have come to offer you this stunt devotion so that you will teach me real devotion.
Oh, lovely.
And I think that's what whatever we call rituals.
And that's precisely the word Swami would often use, when we try to show a card, Swami, I can't live without you, anta stunt. And, we just with emotion, in the spur of the moment, we write something which we know, but which we do not believe in actuality. And so when we write some things like that, Swami would just say, stunt devotion.
And I remember one student had this conversation with Swami. Swami asked him, what do you want? And this boy said, Swami, I want you. Okay, I want only you. But I think the moment he said that, as you said, he knows that it's an emotion which may not really equal those words. He said, Swami, I want you, but I don't understand what it is. I know that I'm supposed to say this, and intellectually and devotionally I know that this is what I have to say, but I don't know what it means. And immediately Swami said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't know what it means and what you will get when you ask for this, but ask only for this.
Wow.
Even artificially make the right prayer.
That's true. To start with, then you'll understand. It's just like taking the right medicine, whether you understand the ingredients or not.
Right.
Just take it, it'll have its effect. I think that's how they came up with all the mantras and everything.
Very true. Okay, we'll go to the next clip in this discourse. Whatever Swami has told till now is the various aspects of the mind and the importance of the mind, the important role that mind plays in the human existence.
యత్ భావం తద్భవతి అని ఈ మనుష్యుని యొక్క భావములు ఎట్టివో దాని యొక్క ఫలితం కూడా అట్టివిగానే ఉంటాయి.
The fruits which man reaps depends upon the feelings and the thoughts which man has.
దీనిని ఆంగ్ల భాష యందు సో థింకెత్ ది మ్యాన్ సో ది మ్యాన్ అన్నారు.
In English language, the same thing has been told as, so thinketh the man, so he is.
మానవత్వం అనేటువంటిది కేవలము ఒక మనస్తత్వంతో కూడినటువంటిది.
The humanity is made up of basically the mind.
మనసు అంటే ఏమిటి?
What do you mean by mind?
మనసు అనగా మనిషే.
Mind means man.
మనిషి అనగా ఏమిటి?
What do you mean by man?
మనసే.
That means mind alone.
కనుక మనిషి అనగా మనసే. మనసు అనగా ఏమిటి?
Man means mind. But then what is mind?
సంకల్పముల యొక్క చేరిక.
It is a conglomeration of thoughts.
ఈ సంకల్పముల యొక్క ఫలితమే మానవుని యొక్క చర్య.
Actions of man are the result of the thoughts which he has.
ఈ చర్యల యొక్క ప్రభావమే జగత్తునందు నిత్యము మనం అనుభవించేటువంటి సుఖ దుఃఖములు.
The joys and sorrows which we enjoy in day-to-day life are the result of our own actions.
జగత్తు యొక్క మంచి చెడ్డలు మానవుని యొక్క చర్యలపై ఆధారపడి ఉంటున్నాడు.
The good and bad which man gets depends upon his own actions.
ఈ చర్యలకు ఆధారం ఏమిటి?
What is the basis for man's actions?
సంకల్పములు,
thoughts.
కనుకనే మానవుని యొక్క సంకల్పములు సత్సంకల్పములుగా ఉండినప్పుడే జీవితము సరైనటువంటి జీవితంగా రూపొందుతుంది.
If man's thoughts are good, his life would be good.
సంకల్పములు చాలా శక్తివంతమైనటువంటివి.
Thoughts are very powerful.
మనిషి మరణించినప్పుడు సంకల్పము చిరంజీవులుగా నిలిచి ఉంటాయి.
Even after the death of man, the thoughts survive.
కనుకనే ఆ సంకల్పములకు సరి అయినటువంటి యొక్క సాధన మనం సలపాలి.
Therefore, we should always make efforts to cultivate good thoughts.
దుస్సంకల్పములు మనలో ఆవిర్భవించకుండా చూసుకోవాలి.
We should never give room for bad thoughts.
దానివల్లనే మానవునికి మధ్య ఉన్నటువంటి ప్రేమతత్వం క్షీణించిపోయింది.
It is on account of such bad thoughts, love between men has declined.
మానవునికి మధ్య ఉన్నటువంటి ఆత్మ సంబంధాన్ని ఈనాడు మానవుడు విస్మరించాడు.
Man has given up the authentic relationship that exists between man and man.
అందరి యందు ఉన్నటువంటిది ఆత్మ ఒక్కటే అనేటువంటి సత్యాన్ని గుర్తించినప్పుడు ఈ భేదత్వం మనలో ఏమాత్రం కూడా ఉండదు.
Once we realize that it is the same Atma which exists in every man, there is no room for difference at all.
కనుక మానవత్వం అనేటువంటిది తన వ్యక్తిత్వంతో ప్రారంభమై
the humanity starts from with his individual.
సమాజంలో ప్రవేశించి
it enters into society.
దేశం నుండి వ్యాప్తించి
it spreads to the nation.
విశ్వమునందు అంత్యమవుతున్నది.
and it comes to a close with the world.
కనుక ప్రపంచం యొక్క శాంతి అంతైకుడును వ్యక్తిపైనే ఆధారపడి ఉంటున్నది.
Therefore, the peace of the world rests on individual.
ప్రపంచము వ్యక్తి ఇరువురు కూడాను మనసు పైన ఆధారపడి ఉంటున్నారు.
The world and the man together rest on
కనుక మనస్సును సరైన మార్గంలో ప్రవేశింపచేయడానికి తగిన కృషి చేయాలి.
We should make efforts, therefore, to divert our mind in the proper channel.
మత్స్యము,
fish,
మా జలములకు విరుద్ధమైన మార్గమును అవలంబించి
going contrary,
ప్రవాహములకు
going against the current,
తన యొక్క ప్రమాదమును తాను తప్పించుకోవడానికి ప్రయత్నిస్తుంది.
it tries to save itself from the danger.
అటులని మానవుడు దుస్సంకల్పములకు విరుద్ధమైనటువంటి రీతిగా తాను సంచరించి వాటిని అరికట్టి తన యొక్క ప్రమాదమును తాను తప్పించుకున్నటకు ప్రయత్నించాలి.
Similarly, man should make an effort to go against the current of bad thoughts and save himself.
ఈనాటి మానవుడు మత్స్యములకున్నటువంటి యొక్క తెలివితేటలను తాను గుర్తించుకోలేకపోతున్నాడు.
Today's man does not seem to have the cleverness and the intelligence of even fish.
ఈనాటి మానవుడు తమ ప్రభావమును తన ప్రమాదములను తానే కల్పించుకుంటున్నాడు.
He is causing all the troubles to himself.
ఈనాటి మానవుడు తన యొక్క సుఖదుఖములకు తానే కారకుడవుతున్నాడు.
Today's man is becoming responsible for his own joys and for his own sorrow.
మన సుఖదుఖములకు కానీ మన కష్ట నష్టములకు కానీ మన విచారములకు కానీ ఇతరులు దీనికి కారకులు కాదు.
For joy or sorrow, for difficulties or problems, no one is responsible.
మన సంకల్పములే మనకు దీనన్నిటికీ కారణం.
Our thoughts alone are causing all these things.
అనేక శాఖలతో ఫలపుష్పములతో కూడినటువంటి యొక్క ఈ సంసార వృక్షములకు మనస్సే వేరు.
For the tree of samsara, which has so many branches and leaves, it is the mind which is the root.
ఈ మనస్సును మనము నిర్మూలము గావించినప్పుడే ఈ వృక్షము కూడా నిర్మూలమవుతుంది.
If you root out this root, this tree will get destroyed.
ఏమిటి ఈ సంసారం అంటే?
What do you mean by this samsara?
బిడ్డలతో కూడినటువంటి కుటుంబమా?
Is it the family life which is full of joy?
కాదు. సంసారం అనగా సంకల్పమే సంసారం.
When you say samsaram, it is not the family, it is the thought.
ఈ సంకల్పములకు మూలాధారము మనస్సే.
The root cause for these thoughts is the mind.
ఈ వేరు వంటి ఈ మనస్సును మనం నిర్మూలం గావించినప్పుడు ఈ సంకల్పములన్నింటి యొక్క సంసార వృక్షము నిర్మూలమవుతుంది.
If you cut the very root of this mind, then this tree of samsara can be destroyed.
అయితే మనోనాశనం గావించుటకు మార్గం ఉన్నదా అని సందేహించవచ్చు.
But is there a method of annihilating the mind? You may put this question.
లేకపోలేదు.
There is.
అన్నింటికి అన్ని అంత్యములు ఉంటున్నవి.
For everything there is an answer.
పుట్టిన వ్యక్తికి కార్యములకు వస్తువులకు అంత్యం ఉంటున్నది.
For every created human being, object or
ఏ ఒక్కటి కూడాను ఈ ప్రపంచంలో శాశ్వతమైనటువంటి లేదు.
there is an end. There is nothing which is permanent in this world.
కనుకనే దీనికి అనిత్యం అసుఖం లోకం అన్నారు.
That is why it is said that is impermanent.
ఈ అనిత్యము అశాశ్వతమైనటువంటి యొక్క సత్యమునందు మనము నిత్య సత్యమైనటువంటి యొక్క తత్వాన్ని మనం పొందాలనుకుంటే దీనికి ఆత్మతత్వమే సత్యమైనటువంటి ఆత్మ సత్యమే సరైనటువంటి మార్గం.
If you really want to find something permanent, something joyous in this impermanent and sorrowful world, it is the Atma which is the basis.
అందువలనే కాస్ట్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమానిటీ అని మానవత్వం అనేటువంటిది సర్వుని ఎందుకు ఏకత్వంగా ఉంటున్నది.
That is why it is called the caste of humanity.
అందరి యందు సమత్వంగా ఉండినటువంటిది కూడా మనస్సే.
It is the mind which is found in equal measure.
అయితే ఈ సంకల్పములు వేరువేరుగా ఉండటం చేతనే ఈ మనస్సు యొక్క స్వరూపం కూడా మార్పు చెందుతున్నది. దీని రంగులు.
But the thoughts are different, although it is called mind. And it is on account of this the problems.
మనస్సు కూడా కొన్ని రంగులు ఉంటున్నవా అని విచారణ చేస్తే ఉన్నది.
Does mind also have some colors? Well, yes, there are colors.
క్రోధ భావంతో కూడినటువంటి మనస్సు ఎర్రని రంగుగా ఉంటుంటారు.
The mind which is charged with anger, it is
స్వార్థ భావంతో కూడినటువంటి యొక్క మనస్సు గోధుమ రంగు వలె ఉంటుంటారు.
selfish mind is in the nature of brownish color.
అహంకారంతో ఉండినటువంటి మనస్సు కమలాపండు రంగుగా ఉంటుంటారు.
Egoistic mind is of the
ఆరెంజ్.
it is orange color.
భగవద్ అద్భుతమైనటువంటి మనస్సు శుద్ధమైనటువంటిదిగా ఉంటుంటారు ఈ వస్త్రం వలె.
The mind which is given to God will be as clean and white as this cloth.
కనుకనే మనస్సును కూడా అనేక విధమైనటువంటి రంగులను మనమే వేసుకుంటున్నాం.
We put different colors to our own minds.
ఇది కూడాను ఇతరుల యొక్క ప్రభావం కాదు.
It is not also the
మన సంకల్పములే మనకి ఈ దుర్గతిని సద్గతిని కూడాను చేర్చగలుగుతుండాలి.
it is these very thoughts which give us an elevated high state or a lowly mean state.
కనుక సంకల్పములను సరైనటువంటివిగా మనం ఎన్నుకున్నప్పుడు, అభివృద్ధి పరుచుకున్నప్పుడే మన జీవితము శాంతి భద్రతతో ఉండగలదు.
Therefore, if we choose our thoughts on the right lines, the proper lines, the security is safe.
So that was a second clip, that discourse. Again, Swami is emphasizing on that point of, how important the mind is, and Swami talks of that concept which Swami repeats often, yad bhavam tad bhavati.
Correct.
That mind actually decides what you see. It's quite true, the very famous analogy of a man seeing a rope and thinking it's a snake.
Correct.
In a sense, you see what you go out to see.
Mm-hmm.
Many times you see that with statisticians, you see that with economists.
That's true.
You want to give a certain color, a certain picture to the scenario. Whatever the numbers throw, you can actually come to the same conclusion because you're looking at it from that point of view.
Bias towards that.
Right. And we're talking of Swami saying that man is thoughts and thoughts are man. I'm sorry, man is mind and mind is man. And literally Swami is kind of removing that line which is there between thinking and action.
Mm-hmm.
We then generally think that what is done is done. But you can think anything, but make sure that you do the right thing.
Another way of putting it is, when he says mind is man and man is mind, suddenly you are wondering, what is man? He is not the body.
Right.
See, he says man is mind. So suppose I say I am my mind, I'm not talking about the body at all. He has separated the body. Man is mind, mind is man. So now we are going to the higher classes. So the syllabus is getting tougher and tougher.
Only where Swami is talking of good thoughts here, no?
Mm-hmm.
Only when man's thoughts are good will his life be good. And the importance of, because as I said again, being good through actions, being obedient with actions
is easy.
Is actually easier. Because it is difficult when you're not accustomed to it. When you come here as a first, when you all came here to Swami, at least for me, when you spent schooling and you come here, even physically, waking up early or following the disciplines, there were also ways in which we showed our obedience to Swami, but that is also only to a certain level. After it comes to the mind.
Correct.
Now I'm reminded of a very, very profound and beautiful incident which happened with one of our old students.
Mm-hmm.
He had a certain unpleasant event in his family.
Okay.
Somebody whom they trusted a lot in the family had cheated them financially.
Okay.
And this person was very well known to everybody in the family. They all knew him, and they didn't expect that of this person to cheat, to fraud the family, a huge sum of money. So one day he was sitting in Mandir and, he was thinking about this. He was very upset with what had happened. And mentally he was ruminating all this and he was boiling with anger. So one of the things he was thinking was, Swami, I'm your student. I cannot go and physically hurt that person because, you forbid us from doing that and having this image of being your student. I cannot do that. So then he said, but that doesn't stop me from mentally, harming him.
Oh.
So sitting in Mandir, he closed his eyes and he said, I'm just going to vent out my feeling by thinking that I'm harming him physically. So he was sitting there and, he was imagining himself boxing this person.
Okay.
Okay, he was sitting and he's thinking, I'm boxing this person, I'm, killing this fellow with my punches. And when this was going on, Swami suddenly came out of the interview room, came to him and said, hey, what are you doing? Okay, he said, Swami, what happened? I'm not doing anything. He said, what are you doing? And I think Swami called him inside the interview room and Swami reprimanded him very strongly and mentioned that person's name. And Swami said, you've killed him 7 times.
Pah.
Okay, he said, Swami, I'm just thinking mentally and I'm not going to, and not that I'm going to repeat this thing in action. I'm just thinking it and just venting my anger out. Swami said, no, it's not right. You've already killed him 7 times. Okay, and Swami said, even though you do it in the thought, you will face the repercussions and it will hurt him also.
Oh.
And the beauty of this thing of Swami saying you've killed him 7 times,
Correct.
Nor did he understand it. And, we forgot about it. He narrated this to us and we were talking about this thing the other day. It never, struck a chord with us. But the other day when we were talking about this topic of reflection, reaction, resound, we said when you say reflection, whatever happens to you is reflection of what you've done and what you think. And reaction again is what you do comes back to you. But resound is something which Swami has given a special twist to it. So he's saying that, not only what you do comes back to you, but it also comes back manifold.
Oh.
It has the ability of,
multiplying.
And scientifically, when you talk of echo, when you talk of resound,
Correct.
it is said that any sound echoes 7 times.
Oh.
And scientifically also, any form of vibration or energy which is sent out into the universe actually gets multiplied 7 times. And here Swami was telling this boy that you killed him 7 times.
7 times. My God, every word of Swami is so just absolute truth. And you just can't realize the meaning at that time.
And it also shows Swami's expectation, what level it is.
As Swami was telling this portion, he's saying that therefore you should have good thoughts, you should not have bad thoughts. I said, Swami, what is this bad thought? What is a bad thought? And the next line so beautifully explains, he says, bad thought is one that separates a man from a man, makes him forget the common divinity. Means anything that makes you think you are separate from the other person is a bad thought. Swami.
That's very, very profound because, what is said is there are only 3 cardinal sins. In the Discourse, Swami says there are only 3 sins which man makes. Everything else you call it a sin, based on the law of the land and the regulations that you have set for yourself.
Correct.
But from God's point of view, there are only 3 sins. Swami said one sin is thinking that you're the body, okay, and thinking that so-and-so is mine, and this person belongs to me.
Correct.
That is second thing. And the third thing Swami says is, I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. It's something similar to this. It again comes back to this idea of individuality, thinking that I'm a separate individual. Swami says these are the only 3 sins.
Oh.
What we think of harming a person and all that, it all stems from these 3 main things.
Wow. So that is a bad thought. Finally.
So no wonder we're all sinners in Swami's eye.
Actually, if you see the way Swami is expounding this, thought and the mind, this is most scientific. And scientists can casually say this is the law of nature. But this is the law. This is so logical, so clear, so absolutely. He just says your thoughts. Therefore have good thoughts. Good thoughts is seeing unity in everybody. The moment you have good thoughts, your chitta is purified. Your chitta is purified, your mind is stable. Then it turns towards the Atman and you realize you are the Atman. There's a straight path. I think somewhere in that Vivekachudamani itself he was mentioning, even doing 1,000,000 pranayamas, you are not going to achieve anything. What you really need to do is inquiry, self-inquiry. I think that self-inquiry and that strong love and urge to know the truth, that is most important.
Even when you're talking of a society, when you talk of a country, or Swami is mentioning that society, and an enlightened society is that where each individual sees his roles and responsibilities as a unit in that society.
Very true.
When that doesn't happen, you have anarchism. Where people are, each one is, ruled by their own whims and fancies. And actually that is what Swami is telling here. That all the disharmony you see and all the fight you see is because of this individual forgetting that he is part of this whole. And when that difference comes, that is a cause for all problems. When man sees another man as separate, that is a root cause for all problems. And that lies in the mind. And that is why controlling the mind and dealing with the mind is so important.
Even if you say what is Atma Dharma and Paradharma, I think you have discussed on this topic sometime. Doing actions, knowing that innate unity with everybody, I think is Atma Dharma.
Swami also calls it, very interestingly, Swami calls it Satya Dharma also.
Okay.
In fact, the major part of the Dharma-vayani, Swami doesn't coin the word Atma Dharma. Swami says Satya Dharma.
Oh.
And then Swami says Satya is that only one thing is Satya. Not the spoken truth. Only one thing is Satya, that is
All are one.
All are one. So that dharma which springs from that belief that all are one is Atma Dharma. Satya Dharma and Atma Dharma are one and the same. That's what Swami says.
Paradharma is other dharma.
Yeah, all the other dharma which are subsidiaries, like petroleum products you take from the crude oil. And even here, as you were saying, what are bad thoughts? And Swami answers it. Here Swami again throws that question and answers it himself. This mind which is all powerful, can it ever be ended? Mind, which is Swami saying, is the seed for the tree of samsara. For this multiplicity, what you see as multiplicity.
What does he say? Actually, samsara is thoughts.
Right. Swami says samsara does not mean only worldly life of having family and all that.
Samsara is sankalpa, he says.
So then Swami is saying that, okay, now this is causing all this problem. Can it be ended? That's the question which will arise. That's what Swami says. And Swami says, yes, it can. And he says,
mind is the root.
Yeah, destroy by diverting the thoughts to the inquiry about the Atman. As we said, inquiry.
Inquiry. That is something which everybody has laid stress on.
Very
inquiry. True. Think of Ramana Maharishi, think of everybody. They just keep telling you, keep thinking, who am I, who am I? I think the basic knowledge is there inside you. All you have to do is just focus all your attention of the mind into that one aspect of who I am really.
And never give it up.
Never give it up, that's true.
Right. One of our colleagues was telling us the other day, he went to Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Okay.
And went to his presence and, he said, if you have any questions, you ask. So he said, I want to know who I am. And immediately he said, that is enough. Hold on to that question.
Hold on to that question.
And never give up till you get the right answer.
Wow.
And he said, whatever answer comes, don't accept it. Because whatever answer comes is coming from your mind.
Oh God.
So he said, don't accept it and hold on to that question.
Just hold on to that question.
It almost says that, it doesn't matter what comes in the end of inquiry, the inquiry itself is paramount.
Wow. And here he gives that beautiful example of fish going against the current. See, that's exactly what you said right in the beginning. The most obvious thing is diversity. So here when he says you are swimming against the bad thoughts are one which sees it as diversity. So the moment you're swimming against your bad thoughts, then you're swimming towards the right direction.
And of course, the last part which Swami says, I hope Swami explains it towards the later part of the discourse. Yeah. Swami saying that mind also has colors.
Colors. I don't know if he is referring to the aura of a person.
Maybe. And that is understandable, aura, because people who have the gift of seeing auras, that's what they say, depending on whether you're depressed, there's a color. That's what was the experience of Mr. Baranowski, right? When
that's true.
It comes to Swami, he says not only Swami is having the largest aura he's ever seen, the aura of love. That's what he says, the color which pertains to somebody who has immense selfless love.
Correct.
Not only does he see Swami having that aura, he sees that this aura is also infectious. It has the ability to wash over all the other auras and give that unified love aura when Swami comes out for darshan. That's the experience.
That's true. That's true. I think, see, when you are in Swami's presence, you feel, wow, you feel so happy. But just to explain that feeling, there are so many things that are happening. His love, his energy just engulfs you. So therefore you feel so happy. If you look at it that way, there's something that's happening which you cannot see, which is the actual reality. So coming back to
one thing which Professor Kasturi writes in Satyam Shim Sundaram is when he is narrating, reeling out experience after experience of Swami, curing people, giving darshan of Ishta Devatas and all these things. He said one wonders, where are all those people who witnessed all these? Okay, because these were people who had the most awe-inspiring experiences. What happened to all these people? And he says because they all left because this was just one aspect of Swami. The other aspect of Swami was a person who was a very strict disciplinarian who wanted a certain thing from his devotees, who had very high expectations of those who claimed to belong to him.
Correct.
And many people who felt, they couldn't live up to that, they felt it was easier going back to their life, where Swami was just a distant part.
No, but that's very true with Swami till till he left us. He would never force anybody to do anything. He would always say, this is the truth, this is the path. Follow it if you want.
And, talking of thoughts being so powerful and Swami saying, as I was saying, that it looks like Swami is removing the line which divides thoughts from actions. And something we narrated even this morning, and I think it's worth recalling. Swami Sachidananda, who came to Swami in the early 1957, he had the duty of administering a huge ashram and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine, 1957, Swami is about 30 years old.
Correct.
And here was this 71-year-old veteran spiritual master who comes to Swami. And Swami pats him on the shoulder and advises him. He says, why do you get into all these mess of administration and all that and organizing spiritual movements? And Swami says, you will give much more benefit to this world if you retire to a cave and do your tapas there. Swami says your yogic vibrations will penetrate the walls of the caves and come and benefit the people here. One thing Swami advising, a 30-year-old Swami advising, and he says after that, of course, he spends a lot of time with Swami and he declares that Swami is the Sarvabhutantaratma himself, and I know it with all my conviction.
Wow. We are so fortunate to
hear from him the ways of controlling the mind.
And it is his compassion that he allowed a recording of this discourse.
Very true.
We are not the rishis who can tap into the cosmic sound and hear what Krishna told way back in the Dwapara age, but he has given us the tool of technology where we have recorded his sound and we are just able to play it back. And you just close your eyes and just imagine Swami actually speaking. When you hear his voice, you can actually see him standing there and giving the discourse.
And to look at it that way, and that's exactly what we're doing here. Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Swami is giving us an opportunity to tune the senses to what Swami is telling. As you're saying, he's giving us the opportunity to even mentally visualize Swami standing there. And Mananam, of course, what we are humbly trying to do, to engage the mind in what is heard, what has to be heard, what has to be rightly thought about.
True.
And the only thing left is to pray to Swami that the Nididhyasanam happens. True. Because His grace alone can make that happen.
Sairam, you just heard an episode of our radio series Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, that is, listen, reflect and absorb. This is a segment that is hosted live on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. by Radio Sai, Sai Prakash and Prem, only on Asia stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 22nd August 2013. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality 1990. The clips played today were from the discourse delivered on 24th May 1990. To listen to the next part of this program, tune in same time, same day, next week. Please do write to us and let us know what you think about this program by writing to listener@radiosai.org. Thank you and Sai Ram from Prashanthi Nilayam.